Let's go.
Hello, everyone. It's David Adler, President of the Australian Jewish Association, and I am very privileged to be talking to our former Prime Minister, the Honourable Tony Abbott. Tony, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview at such short notice.
David, it's a pleasure to be talking to you. I'm sorry that we're talking about a rather frustrating and difficult decision that the government has made. But look, let's talk. I think it was the right decision of the Morrison government to recognise West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to indicate that as soon as the circumstances were right, our embassy would move from Tel Aviv to West Jerusalem. I honestly can't see why the new government has reversed this decision. First, because pre-election, the Labor Party said that there was bipartisanship towards Israel, that the policy of the Labor Party and the policy of the coalition was the same. And second, because obviously with the Knesset in Jerusalem, with the Prime Minister and the President's residence in Jerusalem, with all of the big government offices in Jerusalem, Jerusalem is the capital. And how would we here in Australia feel if a supposedly friendly country suddenly announced that for its own reasons it wasn't going to recognise Canberra as our capital and was going to take its embassy away from Canberra and put it in Sydney? We'd regard it as a bit of an insult. And as I said, I am completely bamboozled by this decision, and I do not see why there was any need for this government to pander to radical Islamism and left-wing activism.
Superb summary, Tony. Can I ask you to comment on a bigger picture? We have now had the government make 3 decisions that have impacted on Israel. And I must say, from our point of view, none of them are welcome. The first was that the UN Human Rights Council has set up for the first time a permanent commission of inquiry into one country, Israel. 22 countries signed a letter of objection. Australia was not amongst the 22. Then we had, a few weeks ago, Penny Wong announcing that she would double the funding to UNRWA, which is the entity that teaches Arab Palestinian kids and has been repeatedly called out for anti-Semitism and glorification of violence. And now, in a rather shoddy manner, to put it mildly, Australia has removed its limited recognition of Jerusalem. And we're very worried that there's a trend here. Do you think we've got cause for concern?
Look, the Australian public feel very warm towards Israel and Israelis. We're very conscious of the fact, as Australians, that Israel is the only liberal, pluralist democracy in the Middle East. We're very conscious of the fact that, like all governments, the Israeli government can make mistakes, but minority rights are recognised. Humane treatment is practiced to the fullest extent in Israel. The tragedy is that there aren't more societies and more countries like Israel in the Middle East. So I can't see the government not wanting to be supportive of Israel in any fundamental sense, because I think the Australian people are fundamentally supportive of Israel. I think it's in Australia's national interest as a fellow liberal democracy that Israel flourish. And in the end, countries should make decisions based on their national interests and their national values, and our national values and Israel's very, very closely correspond. So look, I would counsel against any great alarm, although I certainly would agree with you that these are regrettable straws in the wind, perhaps. Now, as for the UN, this idea that Israel is a country that needs special monitoring, that Israel is uniquely capable of offending against the canons of humanity and decency is just ridiculous. There are any number of regimes that deserve special attention: North Korea, Iran, Russia, yes, the People's Republic of China, Communist China, these governments certainly deserve special attention, but the idea that the Israeli people and government should be marked out for special attention is just wrong. And it should be a condition of any entity in the Middle East receiving Australian funding that entity recognises Israel's right to exist behind secure borders. Now, I don't want to go into the details of what specific entities might be doing because I'm not well enough informed.
Sure.
But it should be a fundamental of Australian government funding of bodies in that part of the world that they have a suitably benign view about Israel.
A few commentators, including us, have noted the Hamas praise of the change in policy in Australia. I think it's the first time that a proscribed terrorist organisation has applauded the change of Australian policy. We are concerned, as others, that this emboldens organisations like Hamas, even though their objectives might be unrealistic. They're encouraged to pursue these unrealistic objectives in their violent ways. So I think your point about conditioning Australian support is spot on.
Well, David, the last person or the last entity that I would want to be applauding me is Hamas. I mean, yes, this is an organisation which is almost universally accepted as a terrorist organisation. The Australian government, as I recall, recently listed it as a terrorist organisation.
Completely.
So you don't want the only applause you're getting to be from organisations which we ourselves regard as terrorists. So again, I think the new government has handled its strategic relations, its defence policy pretty well by and large, but this is an aberration. Certainly, I hope that the government swiftly does what it can to row this back because there was just no good sense in reversing the perfectly reasonable decision that the Morrison government made back in 2018.
So, final question, Tony, because I know time's limited. How should the coalition respond? Our view is a little different to yours, I should say. We would say that the entirety of Jerusalem is the capital and the embassy should be moved. And I think at the time, correct me if I'm mischaracterising your view, but at the time after President Trump had recognised Jerusalem and moved the embassy, you were encouraged that maybe Australia should consider doing the same. So what would you think the coalition's response should be?
Well, the general principle is that the coalition's policy remains what it is until it's specifically changed. There's been no change in the policy of the coalition. So the policy of the coalition is indeed to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to move the embassy at some appropriate time to West Jerusalem, which, as we all know, is within the pre-1967 internationally recognised borders.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Tony. I know you've been a friend of the Jewish community and a friend of Israel. I have a book that I will present to you off camera in recognition for that, but thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, David.